What is up, guys? Frosty 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. We have another character in the Superior 6 team coming to Marvel Strike Force that we are going to go over, and today that lovely, lovely man is the Lizard. So what this is, if you've never seen this before, is this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your humble, we're gonna go with Bard today. I'm not gonna sing it, but kind of, you know, minstrel? I don't know. We're gonna talk over music. That sort of counts, right? Anyway, let's begin. According to Scopely, Dr. Kurt Connors was a brilliant scientist focused on finding a way to regenerate missing limbs when he injected himself with an experimental serum derived from reptilian DNA. The experiment successfully regenerated his arm, but also transformed Connors into a monstrous humanoid lizard with immense strength, razor-sharp claws, and healing factor. The lizard's primal instincts eventually took over, leading to a rampage through New York City and numerous battles with the Spider-Man. We will rate this description of the lizard at the end of the feature. This is our man of the day. Our in-game model isn't quite as tasty as this, but this is the lizard. Name, Dr. Curtis Connors, goes by Kurt to his friends. Yeah. First appearance, Amazing Spider-Man number 6 in 1963. One of the OG villains. Very, very early on in the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery. Some of my favorite characters are like that. And the Lizard's pretty cool compared to a lot of the other ones. Yeah. Power/abilities. He has superhuman abilities, superhuman speed, strength, reflexes, etc. Everything that comes with being superhuman. He has a regeneration factor, a regenerative factor. So it works like a healing factor, but he can regenerate his lost limbs and things like that. So he has a healing factor plus slightly. It is not immediate, though. It does take him a little bit more time than, let's say, Wolverine. Also, at a point, as we are in the current comics, not historically, but as of now, in the last few years, he has telepathic reptilian control. So he can control pretty much any other reptiles with his mind. He also has a sort of mind control situation where he can activate this is also more recent, he can activate the lizard part of human brains and make them act out to their base reptilian instincts, which is essentially just make chaos ensue because lizards. It doesn't make sense in real world science, but that's what it is in the comics, and there it is. That is also a newer ability. That telepathic reptilian control is all newish, last decade. He's been around since the 60s, so last decade is newer. Aliases, Lizard Man and Shed. We're going to talk about Shed. Lizard Man's obvious. For the most part, I almost put no dual on him. No dual meaning that he has no other aliases. Lizard is his alias. He does happen to go by Shed at a point. Why? We'll talk about it. Good question. Affiliations. Okay. One of the first things in going back, so I have a long history with the Lizard, right? I've known who he was since I was a kid. Used to love him in Spider-Man the Animated Series, and I used to read comics all the time when I was a kid and things like that. So I had a lot of preconceived notions. So going back and doing research for this feature, because there's a lot of characters that I'm intimately familiar with, this being one of them, I thought. And so I just assume I know all this stuff. The Lizard, so I have to go back and double check myself. The Lizard is not affiliated as much as I thought he was. So he has the U.S. Army. He was a combat surgeon. I knew that. And then, of course, he's in the Sinister Six. We all know this. But outside of that, he's really only involved with the Sinister 12, which is just the Sinister Six. It doesn't count as a new team for me. But outside of that, he's not in anything. He's sort of a loner. And even with the Sinister Six, here's the culture shock that I received. He was not in the Sinister Six until Civil War, right? The first Civil War, which is in, like, I can't remember, it was between 2004 2006. So as I grew up as a kid, as many of us grew up, or with the animated series and things like this, things like that, the Lizard canonically was not a part of the Sinister Six, which is pretty crazy. because I definitely remember him being that way, but apparently in the at least in the comics, he was not introduced in the Sinister Six until Civil War, and his introduction into the Sinister Six was actually never explained. He just showed up there. It was right in the middle of, we're going to talk about his Shed storyline, because it's the most messed up one, and of course I got to bring that up. If you know, you know. But with it, it was kind of right before his Shed stuff, so we can make assumptions. But yes, so actually, not very affiliated. He very much is sort of a recluse, and he kind of teeters back and forth as a person, as a situation between being a villain and a superhero. So, not a superhero, but we'll call him a good citizen. Background. Coral Gables, Florida. Born as a Floridian, and then he got his PhD in both biology and biochemistry. We're talking about Dr. Connors has 2 different PhDs, making him very, very good candidate to teach Peter Parker. So they actually have a budding friendship, and we'll talk about that kind of going forward. Obviously, he's in the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery. Who died? Can't be a superhero and supervillain without somebody dying. In Dr. Connors' case, his right arm died. I don't know if that counts, but I'm counting it. So, his right arm, as he's working as a combat surgeon, his right arm is drastically injured, and he loses it, has to get it amputated, etc. And so, his work then, after he gets out of the army, his work then becomes centered on trying to find to create a serum that could regenerate limbs for people. He's in this for the good of the world, right? Then with that, he starts working on the serum. He uses reptilian DNA because reptiles famously can certain ones, like lizards, can regenerate limbs, lost legs, lost tails, things like that. So he starts with the base of the reptilian DNA, and he decides to use himself as a test subject because he's very desperate to get his right arm back, and he does it, and it works, but then he turns into a lizard, right? This man seems to have a lot of philanthropic aims. Why would becoming a lizard be a problem? Well, becoming the lizard introduces a new personality. So, Iguana and Hyde. I tried to fit in a joke there. But, so, this second personality is fully reptilian. He aims to just kind of operate on these reptilian instincts, things like eating people, or destroying people, taking over people, or converting other people into reptiles. So a big thing with the lizard is that Kurt and the lizard are 2 separate entities in this one body, and they fight over control. So typically when Kurt turns into the lizard, he doesn't necessarily remember what happens. The lizard sort of operates on his own, and Spider-Man kind of figures this out pretty early on, and a lot of how the lizard combats Spider-Man is, Spider-Man will combat the lizard is to remind him of his humanity and try to bring Kurt out, or he creates like a serum bomb and throws it on him and turns him back into a human. Inhibitor chip. Another thing that I think is pretty interesting to point out is that Dr. Connors, after becoming very aware of his changing into the lizard and things like that, he creates an inhibitor chip out of adamantium that lets him control his transformations. And what it does is when he goes into, he turns into the lizard, he can control his actions to a point. So if the lizard starts to get elevated or angry, it'll kind of convert him back into his human form, so he does not lose his consciousness. He doesn't turn mentally into the lizard, but it also keeps the lizard kind of real chill, which kind of comes into play. There's a point where Kurt has to get rid of his inhibitor chip so he can save his son. We don't really get into that much today, but a lot of Dr. Connor's motivation after he becomes the lizard is his family, Martha and Billy, and we'll talk about them, of course. But there's a point where, since we don't talk about notable events, I'm going to cover it now. There's a point where one of the Cravens steals Billy, the little lizard, and he's trying to kind of hunt down Craven and get his son back, and in which case he needs to get rid of his inhibitor chip so that he can actually fight and take out Craven. With that, you can get a little context into how strong the lizard is. Sinister Six. So this is sort of what this. I already pointed this out, but yes. So didn't actually join the Sinister Six until 2004, 2005, and also is not a member of the Superior Six. That did not happen. So thanks, Scopely. Appreciate you. Yeah. So he is a part of the Sinister Six, not a part of the Superior Six. But after he shows up in in Civil War, he does show up with the Sinister Six more often. But it is the Lizard focus, not Dr. Connors, and this is probably why we don't see him affiliated with a bunch of different teams, is because of the fact that only the Lizard is really interested in the chaos and stuff that the other, 6 teams bring. Moving on. Relationships. So, as far as relatives and relationships, we haven't seen this expand too much. He's sort of centrally focused. He's also appeared in a few movies by now. Dr. Connors has in the Raimi-verse and the Amazing Spider-Man verse. We only see the Lizard in Amazing Spider-Man, but his motivations are heavily the same, kind of aiming towards his family and getting his limbs back. That's sort of his note, right? Which makes some of this stuff coming up real fun. His wife is Martha Connors. His son, Billy Connors, we'll talk a lot about his son today. And then Peter Parker, student and friend. So even after, the Lizard is one of the people that ends up finding out who Peter Parker is. It's pretty hard to avoid. We also see that Dr. Connors is, his mentor and friend. That's how Spider-Man is able to get the antidote to convert Lizard back to human, is from Dr. Connors himself. And as I said before, Spidey uses his inside knowledge of Dr. Connors to bring him back to sanity, if you will. So, notable events. Komodo. I wanted to bring up Komodo because I find it really interesting. This is Sinister Six, you think, stereotypical villain. He's from the 60s, stereotypical villain. They show up, they steal a briefcase, they run away, and did Spider-Man catch him? I don't know. They don't look like regular people, so Spider-Man's on the job, right? So that's how most of your 60s villains go, but with Dr. Connors, you always see that there's this sort of extra layer. So this isn't so much him being a villain as so much as I just find this really interesting art, but it is the art that brings in Komodo. So what this is, there is, and forgive me if I get this pronunciation wrong, I'm sure I will. There is a student that comes to Dr. Connors named Melody Kusuma, who lost her legs in a car accident. The car accident was like really, really bad, to the point where it took them hours and hours to get her out of the car. And she is aware. So this is after, for the most part, this is after the Lizard is sort of gone and Connors is sort of taken back over. And so his formulas become kind of known, but it has its error, right, of becoming a reptile. So she seeks out Dr. Connors. She wants to work under Dr. Connors to learn from him, and also, namely, she wants the Connors serum. She wants to see if she can regrow her legs back. And he's like, you know what? I'm not even messed up about that. I've done some pretty screwed up stuff. So you want to use me, that's fine. But don't use the serum until we've got it figured out. So their goal is to try to perfect this Connors serum and make it to where everything's a little bit more concentrated and controlled. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. And they work on it for a little bit, but she's super desperate to get them legs back. And so she gets it to a point where she's like, that's good enough. And she takes it and she turns into a lizard, going by the name of Komodo. But with the improvements her and Dr. Connors made to the serum, she doesn't lose her consciousness, right? So she maintains her personality as a person, right? She does not have an ulterior monster try to take her over, and she can walk. She's like, okay, I'm a lizard now, but I'm chill with this. All is well on my end, y'all. And Dr. Connors is like, oh, okay, well, so you're not wanting to kill anybody or do anything crazy? She's like, nah, we're good. I kind of want to be a hero, though. I'm pretty strong now. And Dr. Connors is like, you know what? You shouldn't have taken it, but it seemed to work out for you, so that's fine. I could call the cops, but I won't. Join the Initiative, which is a Tony Stark-based Avengers training program kind of situation. So she joins the Initiative and kind of becomes a superhero in training. She's still pretty young in the comics, too, so we might see more of her. Maybe we'll see her in the MCU. Who knows? But sort of, it kind of, it deals heavily with the lizard, but I just find it really, most of his stuff is really sad. So that one is neat, and it leans towards heroic. So I just wanted to bring it up. Now let's talk about sad and messed up, right? Why not? Becoming Shed. So Shed is quite possibly, for my Spider-Man lovers out there, if you haven't read the arc, it's a 5-issue arc where the lizard becomes Shed. If you haven't read it, it is probably one of the most messed up Spider-Man arcs ever. And it's really sad. So what happened? What had happened was, so Dr. Connors, when his mental state is weakened, it's easier for the lizard to take over. There is a point where he finds out that both Martha, his wife, and Billy, his son, have cancer. They, due to radiation from they live by a corporation, the Monaco Corporation, and they have gotten radiation poisoning over time by living in proximation to this space, and they have signs and are developing cancer, and that starts to stress out Kurt really bad, which leads him to he's trying to fix the situation. He sends Billy to live off to live with his aunt to try to get him out of the way, and that helps him out, but he can't get Martha away, and Martha dies. So Martha dies from cancer, and Kurt spirals. Luckily Billy's gone, and he spirals, and the lizard comes back. But this time the lizard comes back with the intent to stay, and he decides, well, Kurt's only human connections to the world are Martha and Billy. I'm gonna kill Billy. And Kurt's gonna be gone. He's so weak right now. If I snip his last human connection, it'll be fine. We'll take care of this. So then the lizard runs and he seeks out Billy, and Billy's like, Dad. By this point, Billy and Martha were aware. There's quite an abusive kind of familial unit there. Like when he's Kurt, he's fine, but the lizard, there's a lot of metaphors you can pull from this, but when he becomes the lizard, he's obviously abusive, extremely threatening, and essentially Billy's like, yo, are you my dad or are you the lizard? And he's like, I'm the lizard. And he's like, you're gonna kill me, aren't you? I've always known that you were gonna kill me. And the lizard's like, yep. And he kills him and he eats him, right? He takes a big portion of him, and he eats Kurt's son, leaving some carcass behind, right? So he gorges, and Kurt goes into a straight up depression and pretty much dies within himself. And the lizard is like, I have fully become the lizard. Now that I'm such a lizard, I've gained these new powers and a new look. He gets like some weird hair, and he's like, and now I'm Shed. I'm no longer a part of the previous lizard that you know. I am the superior Shed. And Spider-Man is the one that finds Billy's carcass and is like, oh my god, I gotta stop the lizard. So for context, when Spidey fights the lizard, what you typically find is the lizard is fast enough and strong enough to stand up against Spider-Man pretty much every time. Spidey has to find some way around it, right? With this kind of letting go of humanity and additional powers, so we can control people's... We talked about his powers a little bit earlier. He can control people's lizard brain, and he could also telepathically communicate with other reptiles. We have a whole new problem on our hands. And so the Spider-Man tries to go and attack him, and Spider-Man gets the ever-loving crap kicked out of him. He's not able to stand up to him whatsoever. There's no way he can beat Shed. So he resorts to some of the things he's done before, and he tries to appeal to the human side of Kurt. And usually it's, hey, remember your family? Come back. In this situation, he's like, here's a picture of your dead son that I found. You monster. How could you do this? Oh my god. And he essentially, like, shames him back from the nothingness inside Shed's mind, and Kurt comes back out, and he is able to kind of suppress Shed and you know, this is where we get the inhibitor chip, right? This is where he puts it on, and then we move forward to the thing I talked about later. Yeah, and later I said, you know, he has to go save Billy. It's comic books. Yes, he ate his son. It was super gruesome and gory and sad. But then the Jackal, who is a Spider-Man villain that I love, and I don't think he'll ever show up in MSF, but he's a big part of the clone saga in various clone situations, and in an attempt to recruit the Lizard to a situation, he creates a clone of both Martha and Billy, and in the Lizard's mind, that erases all the bad things he's done, so he gets Martha and Billy back. Comics, right? There's no repercussions, but if you want to read this, read Shed. It's like Amazing Spider-Man, like 630 something through 630 something, but it's a solid read, and it's really dark and messed up, and it's great. There it is. So next up, power level in Marvel Strike Force. Scopely doesn't care about power level, but here on Frosty Features, I do. And the way that this works is, if you are a multiversal threat, you are a threat to all of reality. And when I say that, I don't just mean your reality, I mean the entire multiverse as it stands. If you are only a threat to your reality, we consider that on Frosty Features a universal threat. You can end your reality, perhaps hop over to another reality, and end theirs. Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale, which means you can level things like moons to large planets, and then with enough time and effort, maybe taking out something like a solar system or a galaxy. Nuclear means you have power equal to that of a nuclear bomb on the small end, leveling things like small cities, and on the high end, maybe being able to take out something like a planetary body. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all peaks of human ability, so you have super strength, super speed, super reflexes, etc., and that means you can level things like a brick wall or up to a city block, right? City means that you are a human trained to the peak level of human ability. This is where we find a lot of our mercenaries, our secret agents, CIA types in Marvel. And then finally we have Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and when left to his own devices and all alone, Greg ain't crap, right? So, theoretically, if I am armed with a plastic trash can lid and America's fist, I, a regular human Frosty, could theoretically take Greg on in a fight, undead Asgardian, and just for the sake of argument, just because I love to see y'all tell me I couldn't do it. So, in the case of the Lizard, we find guilty. Now, so, one thing I find interesting, a lot of the people we've talked on Frosty Features that get their power via serum, their serum is an attempt to recreate the Super Soldier serum, which easily cements them in the Super Soldier lane. I want to point out some differences here. The fact that Connor's attempt was never to recreate the Super Soldier serum. So, his base is completely different. Spider-Man's powers, for those of you who don't know, Spider-Man's powers are from an attempt to recreate the Super Soldier Serum. Green Goblin's powers are from that. Obviously, we've got Captain America with the same thing. The Hulk is the same thing. They all come kind of from that. We find the Lizard to be an actual accident, right? There was no attempt to increase strength. This was not intentional at all. A true blue accident. He was trying to do something good and something bad happened, right? With that, he is at the Super Soldier level, but we do find he is physically stronger than Spider-Man in most aspects. He is, and there, you also have to take into account, right? Spider-Man is known to hold back a lot, right? And in this situation, Kirk Connors is Spider-Man's friend, and Spider knows who he is, right? So it's hard to say that whether or not Spidey does or doesn't hold back, but more than likely he does. But with that, from the context that we have, Spidey has a very tough time taking down Lizard one-on-one. He has to come up with some tricks to take him out. That's a big thing Spidey does with a lot of people, but physical strength, I just want to throw out, as far as Super Soldier goes, a lot of our people that have a recreated Super Soldier serum kind of skirt by at that Super Soldier level just because of that. The Lizard is not the case. He is a higher level, he is in Super Soldier, but he's higher level on it. He's definitely not to the point where he can do nuclear. He has no massive attacks or anything like that outside of maybe developing tech that can do so. But for actual strength, he's no scrub. He can actually go toe-to-toe with a lot of our super soldiers. For example, probably would give Captain America a pretty good run for his money type super soldier. And that's a good way we can look at this. And then as far as the description goes, I mean, honestly, it's extremely basic and really kind of like baseline, but it really, it does describe who he is a little bit. You don't get any of the emotional context, but on all of the bases, it's not that bad. Nice try. Nothing is wrong, and it is what it is. My biggest thing is he looks kind of derpy. He looks like a child, like a kid drew a lizard. Like a pretty decent artistic kid drew that lizard. That's my biggest complaint about this. But yeah, so at the end of the day, nice try, Scopely. It was an okay description, but not quite up to my standards. So yes, that's Frosty Features The Lizard. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. Doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And as a reminder, I stream at the link above every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we do Frosty Features live. Also, please let me know in the comments your favorite lizard moments, anything I got wrong, or anything you wish I would have brought up. I'd love to hear from you. I've had a couple people commenting on my stuff, and it brings me a lot of joy, so thank you all so much for that. That's amazing. But that's all. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, y'all, stay cool.